talk about being in your element. I jumped at the chance to moderate this next session. Why? Because our next guests, Travis Brewer, Adam Jablau, and Dan Maddox, spend their day doing the thing that gets me the most excited about the work you do, which is creating a client experience that isn't just a delivery of a service, but that is creating a relationship that can last a whole life long. Something that's authentic and meaningful and makes your clients feel seen and heard. So, I knew this was going to be a good session when I didn't even want our prep call to end. With no further ado, please welcome my friends Travis, Adam, and Dan to the stage. Welcome, gents.
Thank you.
All right, so earlier today, I was speaking with my friend Mike Evans, who had just sat in a big important meeting, and he was saying that the best thing he did was immediately ask the people in the room, who's on the lineup? Like, who am I talking to here? So in order for you to get the same clarity Mike got when he asked that question, I'm going to ask my friends here. Tell us who's in the lineup. Would you mind sharing with our advisors your role at TD and sort of what brought you to the job you have now?
Sure. So first of all, I've been in financial services for about 20 years. I started back in Canada in 1999, and I moved to the US in 2009. I at one point was managing an outsourced call center for TD Ameritrade, and they asked me to come down to the US and do something similar. But over the years, I've managed some large groups, whether it be contact center teams or retail associates who sold mutual funds to our retail clients when I worked for TD Bank. And then more recently, I've been tasked, and Adam has worked with me as well, which is a couple big initiatives. When our company purchased Scottrade about 3 years ago, we mobilized a small team to bolt Scottrade onto TD Ameritrade. And then the second phase of that was, once the company was bolted on, was to try and figure out the customer experience and everything relating to how we service our now joint clients. So we've been managing that for the last, call it, year and a half, and now more recently we're kind of heading into that next evolution of client experience. And right now I manage some client experience functions and what we're calling our strategy realization department, which is the execution arm of our retail strategy.
Awesome, thank you.
Good. So Adam Jablow, I'm a director within our client experience group at TD Ameritrade, been with the firm for about 9 years. First 5 years have been primarily focused within the strategy and analytics horizontal, supporting mostly our retail business, but also partnering on the institutional side as well. And like Dan, joined the Scottrade integration team about 3 years, focused on that for about 2 years, and then coming out of that integration in 2018, and we'll get to it in a couple minutes, but when we talk about TD Ameritrade really being a client experience company and wanting to win and compete on the client experience, we formed the retail client experience team and partnered with our partners over in institutional. So have been doing that for about a year and a half or so, and loving it.
Great. My name is Travis Brewer, and I'm on the institutional side of TD Ameritrade. So I get to work with advisors who, custody with TD Ameritrade. I'm on our institutional consulting team. I've been in this financial services for over 20 years. Started out in the independent broker-dealer space, moved over to TD Ameritrade about 4 years ago, and am on the consulting side there. So as a business consultant, just help take our practice management offerings to advisors to help them run better businesses. Our mission really is to help advisors identify more opportunities to serve their clients with building their business. And so we just do that kind of day in and day out, and it looks like a lot of going out and talking to advisors in settings like this, but also working with advisors on an individual basis.
Right. Well, so we do prep calls with all the speakers that we bring to Bank each year, and what I liked most about the call that we had was that, you referenced that part of the work that TD has done around the client experience began with the same way so many great epiphanies begin, and that's by looking inward. Can you tell me a little bit about the journey that TD has been on to define its own client experience?
Yeah, I'll start, and then maybe I'll hand it over to Adam. About 3 or 4 years ago, as we were getting together as a senior leadership team, and as Tim Hockey, who's the new CEO, he's also the outgoing CEO, came on, he said, listen, there's basically 3 things that we can compete on. So you may have heard him talk about this in the past, but he said, we can really decide to compete on product, we can decide to compete on price, or decide to compete on client experience. And the way that we thought about it was in our space and in our retail space for sure, we knew that at one day our commission stream would go to zero, which actually happened 2 weeks ago. And so that we knew, in fact, that we had a premium price point, and that was not somewhere where we wanted to compete. But what we did know is that as we had that premium price point, we could reinvest some of that money into client experience. We could have also decided to compete on product, but I think you guys are all aware. In our space, once a product is developed, it's very quickly copied. So we realized that that wasn't going to be a winning strategy for us either. And then when we started to think about just industries in general, we found that there's not too many companies that actually compete and win if you actually try to achieve one or more of those, right? Or sorry, more than one of those, right? You think about maybe Apple is one that probably competes on product and experience and wins on both of them. So we decided, hey, we're going to compete on customer experience. And purely because we knew this day was coming, and if we didn't compete on client experience, then we would have to start from zero, right? Now there's only two things, at least on the retail side of things, that we can compete on. There's no longer price as an option, so it's only product and client experience, and we feel like we have probably a 3-year head start on that. So that was our first thing that we did. The second thing we did was to say, hey, there's more than just coming up with a strategy. It's trying to figure out how you get all 11,000 associates bought in, and then eventually the front lines to be able to deliver on it. And that's how we started to put a plan together, quickly coming out of our integration with Scottrade on how we were going to achieve that. So do you want to share a little bit more?
Sure. So we stood this practice up essentially from the ground up, coming out of that integration and coming after Tim and our senior leadership's decree that we were going to be the company to compete on client experience within financial services. That's a huge change management exercise, as Dan alluded to. So we broke that down into essentially 3 component parts and developed our own maturity model, knowing that this journey is never ending. So the steps that we followed afterwards were all about, all right, thinking about what's our measurement plan and our approach. Who are the folks that we're going to bring into our organization and join us as part of this journey, and how are we going to start to do some of the change management practices throughout the people part of the organization, from anything from paper performance scorecards to MMR culture, measure, manage, and reward. And then we started to look through some of the other ways in which we did work and prioritized work at TD Ameritrade, especially within the retail business. Making sure that they were focused on addressing friction points within that client experience. So we're really, instead of just developing roadmaps from, individual product owners, we're really mining all the various listening posts that we have out there, whether it's our surveys, whether it's what we're hearing from client-facing associates, and all the various other ways in which we gather feedback, even on social media, and all of that feedback essentially translated into the roadmaps that we had across all of our channels. And then another key component of it, Dan mentioned, we have 11,000 associates throughout our entire organization, 5,000 plus within retail in the business that we support, was developing communication plans and making sure that every single associate, whether you work in the legal department, whether you work in operations or back office, understood their role within the client experience so that they could feel part of that journey with us. And look, what we saw through the year and a half that we've been at this is double-digit score increases across not only just our total retail relationship survey, but also in the individual interaction channels through sales, through service, and through digitals. And we're seeing that pay off. And I'm not saying we're at the last stage right now. There's certainly going to be many steps to follow, but now we're all about finding ways in which we can continue to optimize that program. Understanding the various ways we survey our clients, whether it's through email surveys or in the moment digital touch points, looking at the questions that we're asking, whether they're likely to renew with us or continue business with us or invest more business with us, and trying to find that optimal mix that aligns with our journey.
So you touched on 2 things that I want to draw out, particularly for this audience. One, you mentioned, and so we're talking to some advisors who perhaps are sole proprietors, but the vast majority of them are working on a team. So I'd love for one of you to answer how important and why is it that it isn't just in the advisor's mind what the client experience is, but that it's something that's living and breathing inside their team, whether their team is 1 other person or 3 other persons, or in your case, 11,000 other people. And then also sort of let's follow up that with what that client communication looks and feels like, and how the experience lives not just in their office, but out in the world with their prospects and clients. So start first with perhaps the team-oriented question.
I'll take the one from the advisor's perspective. The benefit of competing on experience is that experience creates the value for the client, and that ultimately earns the loyalty from the client. It can't just be in the mind of the advisor. It has to be something that's communicated throughout the entire team, and the entire team has to be on board with it. Because it's just like any other strategy that an advisor decides, this is how we're going to compete, this is how we're going to differentiate ourselves, and this is how we're going to actually grow the business, is through this particular strategy, in this case, client experience. And so whatever that experience ends up being, it's got to be something that has to be able to be communicated down to everybody in the organization, all the way down to, because the person who's actually most important in that kind of chain is the person who's actually delivering the experience to the end client. So they have to know with great clarity exactly what is it that I'm actually trying to do in my role, or how is it that what I do in my role achieves this goal of client experience for our firm.
And I challenge the audience to think about how much time and energy you invest in yourselves and your team in getting up to speed on things like our investment philosophy, right? It's a critical part of what you do. You go to Dimensionals Foundations, you attend the BAM and Loring Ward events. Are you putting the same time and energy into getting your team up to speed on the client experience aspect of what you're offering?
Yeah, and what I would also say is, like, it's easy for most of us just to say, yes, we're already managing relationships and leading on the client experience.
Yeah, check.
But once you have everyone lined up against it, so the easiest example that we can give, like that might translate is, although our office is huge or pretty big, but somebody who's doing processing, for example, like what does it mean to win on the client experience for them when they're doing, 1,500 manual entries a day? Well, guess what? One manual entry error has a direct impact to some end client, most likely some advisor and then an end client as well. So trying to figure out how they can understand that and then manage effectively through that. And that's from every aspect of your work. So if you have a sales assistant, in terms of how they interact with a client or even interact with the back office or whoever you're doing your custody business with, all of that impacts the overall client experience. And that's how we started to think about our overall communication plan. More recently, we've rolled out the next evolution of client experience, which is defining what we call customer experience principles. And the way that we did that was, of course, allowing people to be able to help us create those client experience principles, but then also allowing them we give them the words, but then they translate them into what it actually means for them to run their part of the business.
Yeah, I was going to say it also for that communication. It can't just be one and done. It's got to be always on. Mm-hmm. And if I were to put years underneath, our maturity model, I would say circa 2016 is when Tim made the decree, but it wasn't until 2018 did we really get into the change management and start to change the place. And a part of that was, we identified the need to stand up this new practice to make sure we had that consistent focus, and that's when we really started to see the gains. So for sure, I think it's got to be, always on versus one and done. And I think it's also got to be a little bit of mix of like intrinsic reward and extrinsic reward. So obviously folks are motivated by money and motivated by scores, and I think that was an important component to make sure everybody felt like client experience. They can make a difference in client experience regardless of what role you're within the organization, but then it's also finding the right training opportunities that we overhauled, and Dan, you could probably speak to this, our learning and development platforms and provided curriculum and coursework so people could study and understand why this was important and why we were headed, towards this journey. And it trickles all the way down to the hiring practices and the people that you bring in, whether it's from different firms that have already focused on a customer or client experience, or just weeding out the right questions to make sure you're having somebody who truly is motivated by wanting to help the client.
Right. So when you're thinking about experience, we touched on this a little earlier in the conversation, which is you said, well, I have clients, I have good relationships, they're strong. What do you think gets in the way between an advisor who feels like she or he are coasting, right? They've had a successful business, they've built a good practice, and really being able to define why that's been successful and then replicate it. What do you see advisors struggle with in terms of actually defining what their experience is? And what advice would you give to anyone in the audience listening who wants to start the same sort of journey TD has made?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think the struggle is that a lot of advisors have been very successful at building their business, and they're just naturally good at the relationship building and whatnot, and that has become their client experience. But it's one that we would say it's not by design, it's by default. that advisor is just doing what comes natural to them, and so it's hard for them to be able to articulate or put into words exactly what it is that is creating value in the relationship with this client. And it's that ability to sort of transcend, like, hey, what is it that I'm doing? What value do I actually bring to to this relationship with the client? What are the things that I'm creating for this client? What is the change or maybe the transformation or whatever that is? What's the end of it with the client? What am I doing that's really driving value there? And then to be able to identify that and to start to build out an actual strategy, one that like what Dan and Adam have been doing on the retail side is to say, here's the strategy, and now that that's clear, we need to communicate that in the organization so that everybody in the organization has clarity around what that is. Now we can start to execute on those ideas. And I think that's the challenge for advisors is it's too often a little bit by default and not doing the work to actually design it out. Because if you look at all these great companies like Apple, it was two guys in a garage at one point, right? And now it's the most valuable company in the world. It didn't start out as this enormous thing. It was two guys who had an idea, this visionary and this kind of implementer. And they, along the way, figured it out and got it right in a lot of ways, right? And wrong in other ways. But it is a journey. It's not you flip the switch, hey, we've got client experience, boom, we're done, check the box. It doesn't happen that way. It's not that easy. It does take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of focus, and it takes a lot of communication, over-communication, ongoing, to get everybody, and you're learning along the way, because it's going to always be growing and developing.
Right, it's living and breathing versus
totally
something
is.
that's
It totally
static.
is, yeah.
So you've worked with a lot of advisors indirectly and directly. Walk us through an example, either of a firm that you think has nailed client experience that you've worked with, or just something you've seen in the marketplace. Start helping us put some context around what you mean by it's a journey, and you talked about identifying and then communicating and executing. Walk us through what that might look like in our real lives as advisors.
I'd say I see examples of where advisors are kind of nailing parts of it.
Right.
I think this interest in client experience in the financial services world is, I think we're all kind of new to it in a way. I know it's been out there for a while, and there's certainly great examples of other companies out there that just absolutely nail every aspect of it. You can think of Ritz-Carlton or Disney. In the advisor space, some of the areas where I've seen advisors really just getting it right is an example of an advisor who the problem they were trying to solve, which ended up becoming part of the experience, but initially it was that the average age of their clients every year kept going up.
Right.
And that's a problem in the business, right? Okay, the average age of
not
my business,
uncommon to the people in this
So
room.
the challenge is, well, how do I attract younger clients? Because I need to either flatten that out or I need to lower it. Well, how are you going to attract younger clients? What's important to them? What do those younger clients value, these younger generations? They realized that they needed to overhaul the whole way that a client interacted with the firm from the very beginning of the website, the mobile, and then the accessibility of the advisor. So they went through this whole technological upgrade to the whole experience for clients. Once that was done, it was like a 2-year process for them. He said afterwards, 95% of his new clients are Gen X or younger. That by changing the experience for the end client, it made it more attractive for these other clients that say, yeah, technology, mobile, remote access, that's of value to me. That matters to me. I will work with an advisor who's doing something like that over the advisor who's forcing me to make time in my schedule to go to the office and meet in a more traditional way. And this is what's challenging about our business today. We've got like 4 different generations of clients that advisors are working with today, and all of those generations have different needs and values. And I think that makes it really challenging for advisors to say, where do I focus, right? Another example is advisors that we worked with recently. They were actually able to put to words sort of like what Adam said, you've got to have this sort of client experience, these principles that are driving or that clarify for you what it is you're trying to create. And we were working with these advisors, and the advisor actually put the words, he said, when clients work with us, we want them to feel like they've been dealt with in a way that's graceful and kind. And I was like, wow, like you have those actual words that you're trying to create, the feeling that you're trying to create for the clients. That's an awesome way to get everybody inside the organization now to say, is what I'm doing accomplishing that for those clients?
One of the things that I would also say a little bit take it a little bit of a different direction, which is finding out what you're good at and what you actually want to concentrate on from an experience standpoint. It's easy for me because I'm in retail now, so we concentrate on investors who are lifelong learners, want to continue to establish and learn themselves, do some of their investing themselves, maybe get some validation from an advisor when they need it. But the point there is that's where we're like going to point all of our energy towards, is that type of client. So in your space, if you're good at one or two of those elements, not those specific ones, if you really key on that. But then the other piece that we're doing is assigning value to some of our clients. And this is a little bit taboo and a little bit of a different way of thinking. But where we've come up with some, I'd say, problems from some of our associates is trying to say, well, if you're in a branch and somebody who has a low dollar account and doesn't do a whole lot of transactions with us, doesn't add a lot of value to my day, so why should I spend time with them? And so the point that we try to say is we should assign value to our clients based on the commitment that they give us. We're not going to turn anybody away. We're going to provide them with a great level of experience. But what that experience may be for somebody who doesn't have as many assets or does not do as many transactions with us might be one that's more of a self-directed, self-service, great digital experience versus spending a lot of your human capital time with somebody of that value and spending it more on the relationship building of a more higher value client. And sometimes that's a little bit tough for us to kind of get over that hump of saying, like, I still want to treat people all the same, but I also want to try to treat people different. And I think there's a little bit of an art there to be able to do that in an effective way that doesn't really tick clients off.
You can't be everything to everybody. It's a fool's errand, and we're guilty of that. And I think we're starting to, change our ways a little bit. And some of the things that Dan just said, just in terms of companies that I think deliver that superior client experience. Rather than going through sort of like the list of the cliche companies everybody sort of knows out there, like to me, the most important thing when I'm dealing with a company is not feeling the organizational structure or chart. Whether it's interfacing on a mobile application, whether it's making a phone call in inevitably, or on a desktop site or whatever it is, like to not feel that organizational chart and to be able to solve for whatever I want on whatever mode of communication or channel that I'm using. To me, is the most important. Some companies are successful. Financial services is a little bit tough because it is so relationship based, but like clients shouldn't know, hey, am I speaking to somebody within the service organization, the back office operations organization? That service or that experience should be seamless throughout the channels that they're communicating with.
So we talk a lot with advisors who will come to us and say, I think I need a niche, right? Maybe I should start serving dentists or divorced women or maybe attorneys or doctors or you name it. How important, in your opinion, is it that either you have authentic energy around said audience or experience that makes you particularly useful to said audience versus thinking, there looks like there's some potential there, maybe I could see if I could make that a big fit?
Yeah, I'd say it kind of goes along with what Dan said about what you're naturally good at. So I think if there is that authentic energy around serving a particular niche, there's a huge benefit. We've all heard all the folks in our industry giving talks on like niche marketing and focusing on a niche. The benefit of doing that alongside client experience is it gets really easy then to define what the experience is for this niche market, because you've got a very narrowly defined set of a niche group of clients that you're working with. So you can very easily identify like really what's at the heart of what they value. So it complements client experience very nicely, but you're right. You can't just like, everyone like get FOMO and run out and like, I'm going to go get a niche all of a sudden, right? Because you may not actually like working with that niche, and it's going to come through. You're going to like, that's a lot to take on, right? With those clients.
I would say you would want to look at it a little bit differently too, possibly, which is attribute-based versus, for example, occupation or sex or whatever it is, which a lot of people tend to defer to because they figure that all dentists have this way of thinking and then I'm going to market to them and they're all going to like it. The one thing that we've done over the last year is take a look at our segmentation strategy with clients, and we did a bit of a data dump in terms of like understanding what their attributes are. client attributes and then putting them into buckets and then saying what do they, and then testing it versus the clients in terms of what their clients' needs and behaviors are, and then offer up experiences that they feel and want from us. It doesn't have to be based on, some of the demographic stuff that we just talked about, but based purely on what they do, what they like, and how they want to interact with you, versus figuring that going after dentists is a possible opportunity. So we've actually established in our client base on the retail side anyway, is that there's 5 different clients: new, unengaged, traders, sophisticated investors, or engaged investors, and just investors. And the way that you start to find those attributes becomes very clear when you cluster the data that says, somebody who does some active short-term trading, has portfolio margin, takes advantage of trading options, things of that nature, usually have the same client needs and behaviors versus somebody who is looking for guidance products, estate planning, 5 or 6 other attributes. And then that allows you to maybe concentrate a little bit differently on those attributes and clients' needs versus some headline, just going for males under 40 or something along those.
Because then you could get a male under 40 who's also a dentist, who also is divorced, who
That's
also
right.
is, right. So Travis, you've done some work on the institutional side, I know, around being able to pull the thread through all the way from clients who have just become engaged or who are prospects, and then kind of keeping them engaged throughout. Do you want to share a little bit about how you've thought about that?
Yeah, so this is, I think you're going to share a slide here from our client experience program, which we had launched a little over 3 years ago. And so this is when we really began to help advisors focus on creating that client experience. I like this slide because this is a helpful framework for advisors to look at their business. And one thing I would say, if you say, yeah, we want to adopt client experience as a strategy for our business. This is how we want to kind of grow the business. We want to get better at it. I will tell you, if you've got a client, you've got client experience, right? You've got a client experience. That's, like I said earlier, it's by design or it's by default. And we want it to be by design. In order for something to be by design, you have to make specific decisions about what kind of an outcome are you trying to create. So when we put this program together, we went out and we surveyed advisors who were on our platform at TD Ameritrade. We said, tell us about your client experience. And from all of that work is kind of where this slide comes from. So we found that in our industry, there are 4 primary phases that a client goes through. What I like about this is looking at the journey through the client's eyes. It's the same client that's in this universal phase, moving to the prospect phase, moving to the onboarding phase, and then going to the ongoing phase, which I think is kind of unique about our industry in that we will have clients in that 4th phase, that final phase, for possibly decades, right. A long time. This is the emphasis on that relationship. This is about a relationship. If you're thinking only transactionally with clients and you're going to be with them for 20 years, don't be surprised if they go find another advisor because they're not getting any value out of the transaction. They get value out of the relationship. And it's in that 4th phase, that ongoing phase, where you're going to have the highest likelihood of success to have these folks actually talking about your business to other people. Because it's that word of mouth that you get from that loyal client base that is really going to start to drive the beginning of the phases here, that universal phase. So you've got a goal in each of these 4 phases. In the universal phase, it's all about discoverability. How do people discover me? Is it word of mouth? Is it something that we're doing to advertise or go out into the market with a specific message, with a specific client in mind? We're reaching out to that kind of those segments of clients or those attributes. We're really trying to communicate to someone with a very clear person in mind. Moving them through the prospect phase, where it's all about those first impressions. That's kind of our goal there, right? We want to begin to start to tell the story of value of working with us, what the client is going to get out of that. Start setting those expectations early about the experience with our firm, then moving them to that onboarding phase. Now, you talked about pain points, right? When clients get to this onboarding phase, for the folks in this room, this is where we're setting up the accounts. We're doing a lot of heavy lifting. There's a lot of natural touch points with the client during this phase because we're capturing signatures, we're setting up the accounts, we're moving assets, we're putting the plan into place. if a client's going to have any real pain points, it's probably going to start here. This is a great way to look at your business and say, let's just carve out the onboarding process and identify where's the pain points for the clients. And let's start removing those for the clients. Because just in making that decision and removing pain points, it's going to enhance the client experience. Then we get them into that ongoing phase, and let's start to cultivate the relationship. And this is all about that ongoing phase. I would say that this is probably the hardest of the four. And the goal would be engagement. How do I continue to engage with the clients? And what we too often see as advisors, we'll move back to the business development phase here, go to that universal prospect phase, and then do all the reactionary work that's setting up the accounts.
Right.
Kind of forget about the ongoing phase. But you've got a lot of really great opportunities here to further establish, deepen the relationship, grow that relationship, and get those clients to be working on the business development for you.
Right.
While you continue to manage those and cultivate those relationships.
And I think that's the point I wanted to touch on with this slide. I would be interested to know what the panel's thoughts, because not every advisor in this room, their charge shouldn't be, I should go out and define a client experience for a new type of client I don't yet serve. Like, many of them have thriving books of their already sort of ideal type of client, but could use a refresher on, okay, what is the experience like for those longtime clients? And what am I doing so that they are completing the cycle and pushing people through the door?
Yeah, I'd say for this audience, a great takeaway after conference would just be, let's think about that ongoing phase and do something like a SWOT analysis, just something really basic. Let's just as a team identify, what is our experience today?
Right.
What's working about it? What's not working about it? And begin that process of like, okay, let's start putting the building blocks into place for defining, one, where are we really successful? Let's exploit that and build on it. Where do we need to improve? Let's improve that. So that once that's clearer to us, it gets easier to know exactly who it is that we're serving and how to communicate that in that universal phase.
But I'd ask Dan and Adam, perhaps in the work that you've done with TD, if I'm in my own practice and I'm looking at it my own way and I'm bringing my own biases to those views, how might I look for insight outside of my own understanding of what my experience is? What should I be doing? Should it be talking to my team? Should it be talking to my existing clients? What would you recommend for people who perhaps want to get that objective view of what their experience might be?
I think it's everything that you just listed. I mean, we have a client journey mapping discipline within our organization, which basically breaks it down into, our analogous phases within the retail business. And, those client journeys can be transactional and, opening up a new account, trying to find a form somewhere online, or placing a trade. So we're looking for those friction points within those individual client journeys, or they can be experiential in that, I'm helping, save for college, for retirement, for, we just went through a life change or a move, or had a child, or whatever it might be. So I think for us, it's all of those data points that you just sort of rattled off, whether they're quantitative or even qualitative, help you build a picture of what that client journey looks like, and then breaking down those journeys into the component parts and into those friction points where you're introducing your organization into that client journey, which is really where it doesn't necessarily belong. That's at least the way we started to do within the retail business. And it doesn't have to just be massive amounts of data dumps and reams of data. I mean, really just spending a day in a room with a whiteboard and drawing out what actually happens from point A to point Z, and finding out how can you be better in between.
Yeah, and also, like, you can't not miss actually asking your clients. I think sometimes advisors and associates feel like, can I ask the client why they actually still want to do business with me? They'll usually be pretty candid, and they may give you some insight that you didn't think actually you knew, or that you didn't already know. So I would make sure that you do spend time doing that. And then on the flip side of that, I'd also make sure that based on one client's feedback, you don't change the way that you do business. Because we've tended to do that too, where we get a focus group of 4 people, and one guy screams the loudest or gal screams the loudest and tells us something, but it's not validated by all of our other listening points that we have out there. So the more feedback you can get from clients, the better, but you just have to take each element and make sure that it fits into it.
Yeah, I'd add to that by saying that when we were putting our program together, we surveyed 1,000 end client investors, and we asked them that very question: do you want to be involved in shaping your experience with your advisor? only 840 of them said yes.
Only
You know,
840?
Yeah, so 84% said yes, and half of that group said it was really important. Now, I know that advisors often, what we see is a kind of, you know, the feedback loop, it's hard, and it's, what do I do with the information, and yada, yada, yada. I would say, look at it this way. Your clients, they want you to be the very best financial planner they've ever worked with.
Right.
They actually want you to succeed. So it's in their best interest to help you with that, with making that business a little bit better on their behalf. So I would say, even, I don't know, you guys might disagree, but I would, for an advisor, I'm like, if it's easy and it's something that's implementable, do it, right? So even if it's an informal client feedback loop and it's not as scientific as, you know, like going out and doing the focus groups and whatnot, I would say, like, ask every client 3 simple questions at the end of every client review meeting. So at the end of the year, you've got this really great sample of feedback from all your clients. Now you've got information you can actually do something with and make some decisions on. That feedback loop is so important because it's the other part of client experience. Not only how you serve them, but what's their part in that. And they're going to help you identify, like, what are the areas that we may not see where we can actually improve. They'll give you ideas that you just clearly just never would have seen. And it's a great voice to have.
A natural human reaction is that you don't want to hear bad news, I think. And I remember when I first started at TD Bank, this was like 20 years ago, and somebody gave me a pen and said feedback is a gift, and I never really realized what it actually meant until I started to get into the client experience piece and people were giving us feedback. It wasn't the stuff that we wanted to hear, but how important that was to shaping the way that we needed to be and needed to change to be successful. So don't let that be a barrier of you asking because you're afraid to hear some bad news. You'd rather the client tell you the bad news than take their money away from you. So go out and ask. And I think, like anyone, they want to be part of the solution, especially if you're asking them for candid feedback.
Yeah, I love the point you made about your clients want you to succeed. I mean, as important as the relationships and as positive as they are, we have to sometimes remind ourselves it's not adversarial. Like, we all win if I'm doing a good job at this.
Yeah, and it's like for the client, it confirms for them. It's like, yeah, I'm working with the right person. There's a psychological validation that's going on there whenever they're giving the advisor that feedback. And then I would say the other really good best practice is always go back and close the loop with the clients. If you ask for their feedback, you've got to go back to them at some point and say, we listened to you. This is the information that we were gathering, and we've made these decisions on your behalf. I think it would be a great end of year client letter to say, we asked all of our clients some information, and not saying that everything that your clients are going to tell you that you're actually going to do, but you make those decisions internally about your business. But go back to the client and say, we heard you. We've made changes on your behalf. That's part of the experience with the client now. They're like, wow, they actually value my feedback. So the next time you go and ask them for feedback again, you're more likely to get even more feedback from them because they're like, we believe you'll actually do something with that. It's not just a survey that's going to get lost in the internet.
Absolutely. How important is it as an advisor to seek inspiration on client experience outside of your own industry? And what are some ways you would recommend that our friends in the room think about what experience looks and feels like in other service relationships they have in their lives?
I would say the quote from Steve Jobs, I'll let you guys answer this, but he said that all great art is stolen.
Right.
I'd say, yeah, look outside the industry and see where other people have done the hard work of trying to figure out what it is that they're trying to create for their clients, and see, can you use that as a springboard for ideas in your own firm? I mean, it's a quick way to get to an answer, I would say.
One of the things that I'll go back just more to Apple, but not in the traditional sense, but I know that our advisors or financial consultants often struggled with having to be the subject matter expert in everything. So I took a look at the Apple experience, and if you think about it, if you've probably all walked into an Apple store, and you watch how it actually goes down is you talk to somebody, they put you in the right queue, whether you know it or not, and if they're not an expert, they go get somebody else who is an expert on the watch or the phone or the computer that you're looking for. So I think people have to get over the fact that thinking that they have to be everything to every client isn't the way to go. There's other ways that you can look at the customer experiences and still have a good team surrounding you, whether if it's your sales assistant or somebody in the back office or somebody who's better at estate planning, and utilize them to your benefit so that you can create and instill those experiences. At least that's one learning that I got from Apple in terms of how they create their client experience, where if they don't know the answer, they find someone very quickly to be able to solve whatever issue it is that you have.
Right, which is truly an extension of the beauty of the partnership you have now with BAM and Loring Ward, because that is the purpose of your regional director or your fixed income desk or any number of the resources you have at your disposal, which is to reinforce to your clients that what you're smart enough to know is what you don't know, and that does not have to be a liability, that can actually be a benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think inspiration just starts with yourself. Like, what do you see in experiences that you have or interact with, and organizations that you do business with? And yeah, so I said it before. I won't go in the long list of cliches and companies that are out there, but sure, I'll go there for a minute. But there's Uber. I mean, how simple can that be? Like, you can summon a car with, who thought we could have done that 10 years? It's transformed suburban adult life for me and my family back at home. So for a variety of reasons. But yeah, and then Amazon. Like, how do they know? Like, I want to buy that when I didn't even know I wanted to buy it myself. Like, that's where the inspiration is. So you're interacting with
listening to everything you say.
Yep, yeah, true. Yeah. It's like they're in my brain.
Alexa,
why is this thing in my ear? Yeah. No.
So here you have a group of advisors on the verge of, or in the midst of, likely strategic planning for 2020. Like, across the panel, what would be the one thing that you would suggest they turn inward, like your firm did when it came time to think about your own client experience? What's the one thing you'd suggest that our advisors do as they're thinking about next year?
Me, that's a question for me.
I like to stump my mouse.
Okay, that's a good one. I'm trying to pick the one. I mean, if it's to say that they wanted to leave the room and they say, yeah, we want to not just dabble in client experience, but actually like adopt it as a strategy, then to go back and do that work. Say, let's figure out, do that little SWOT or something simple like that. Just something that's internally focused and analysis of what's working today, what's not working. Let's go out and get a small group of clients, maybe have our first little focus group, and dip our toe in the water there with some client feedback and say, we're thinking about, we're planning on going and improving in this area for our business, and we want to start this feedback loop with the clients. That's an important voice in this one. So I think it would just be the decision to actually do the work, because it's a long-term journey. It's not you're not going to have it done in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's long-term.
Having dabbled in strategic planning for at least the last 9 years at TD Ameritrade. Like, I'm a big framework guy. Some of the slides that you've seen up there are things that we've pulled together. And so, one, you can do anything. You just can't do everything. So try not to solve for the entire world at once. Break things down into their component parts and come up with some sort of framework that you can rally around, either yourself, your teams, internally, and just try to chunk out that work and develop your own version of a maturity model. Like, our journey will never end. We're just going to keep getting better, but it's got to start somewhere. So figure out what's most important to you, what's achievable, start to put wins on the board. If you have these, goals that, go out, 1 to 3 years, like, you want just some of that internal satisfaction of being able to check things off the boxes. So, sit down, spend some time, and do that introspection from where you want, where you were and where you want to go. Break it down into some of those component parts, and you could see up here on the slide, this is a bunch of the work that we've done over the last 18 months, but it started with a bit of a clean slate, and we started to chip away at things. We've got a lot of checks, but we got some open boxes too coming up.
Yeah, and I would just say understand what you think you're good at, and then validate that with your clients, just to understand if there are any differences or they tell you anything different. And then what I would say that I think has a client experience bent to it, which is make sure that you're spending your time on the right clients, delivering the right experiences. And again, I go back to the value spectrum. And it's not to treat people badly, but it's to create for yourselves a baseline experience that you know that you can deliver to all clients, but make sure that when there are some clients who have committed more to you, that you're also committing more energy to them. And I think it allows you to plan your days a little bit better and the experiences that you're going to deliver based on value and potential future value for sure, versus running around trying to be everything to every client. That tends to be a losing strategy. And you probably see more clients walk out the door because you're being stretched too far.
Help us understand what's at stake here. So where does the advisor who rests on his or her laurels end up in 2019 or 2020 or 2025? I mean, change in our industry is happening at what sometimes feels like a cataclysmic kind of place. Is there a sense of urgency, and what happens if we decide to ignore the call of experience?
For me, I think the sense of urgency comes around from an advisor. If they're 5 or 10 years away from retirement,
Yeah.
for them, it's how do I continue to build the business so that I can realize this full value of this, this practice that I've built over these years. Whereas if I'm not differentiated, if I'm not competing, if I'm not growing, that when I get to the end of this and I'm ready to transition the business over to somebody else, I'm not going to realize the full value of it. It's going to be a discount, really, because it's not growing. There's some risk there. If I'm the younger advisor, it's how do I set my business on a path for this 20 or 30-year trajectory of growing and success. And so I think in either way, it's this is important. You got to stay focused on what's going to position your business to grow, whether it's I'm exiting in 5 years or 10 years, or I'm 5 years into this and I've got a long pathway here, before I get there. I think it's all about growth, because if the business is growing, then you can reinvest in the business where you need to. And as it gets larger and larger, start bringing in the specialists and whatnot so that you can continue to meet the growing demands of the clients, because your clients' needs are going to change over the years as well. So it's all about just kind of keeping up with all of it, really.
Mm-hmm. All while new entrants, new paradigms, new regulations are constantly going to be thrown our way. Inevitably, would the industry have gone to zero? Absolutely. If it weren't for Robinhoods and others like that, would it have gone a little bit longer? Probably. So I think, having those, sort of external forces are always going to, find ways for, us to differentiate and always strive to be just a little bit better and be, one step further ahead in the food chain.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the way that we started was thinking about competing on product, price, and experience. And I know in the retail space, the price has gone away, and in many respects, and a lot of the other businesses that you guys are in right now, fees continue to be compressed. So that's no longer something that you can go to market with for your clients, because everybody's doing the same thing and it's going away, if anything. So you got to create experiences that allow you to build your business. Versus just competing on traditional methods of, I've got better products or proprietary products, or, I'm competing on price. So you only got 2 things left that you can really compete on.
Right, and there's a business case to do it. It isn't simply just to offer the best experience. It's what makes your firm the most valuable. It helps you attract the best talent. It helps you retain your clients and sort of insulates you against some of the risks that are out there in the competitive forces or the compression of fees or whatever it is that's changing in our industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a study done by one of the business schools. I want to say it was MIT. It wasn't MIT. I'm trying to think. I recently read this. But they looked at how much of a business owner's control, how much do they actually control around their business? And it was 55% of the things about their business are within their control, and 45 were sort of these external forces. So if you're thinking about, well, what's within my control? Well, absolutely creating an experience, understanding who my clients are, what they value, and creating an experience that goes along with what they value is within my control, that I can actually do that. And then you're right, it does sort of insulate you against all these external forces that are kind of pushing against the business as you're trying to grow the business. A great example, you said Amazon. I love doing this. How many people in this room, show of hands, have a Prime membership with Amazon? Okay. Okay. And when they raised it by $20 this year, did you cancel your membership?
Yep.
Right. No, it's the price didn't matter. It's the experience that we get through Prime that really drives the value for everybody in this room and for us included. Because you're like, I can be in Walmart and then order the item, and I don't have to carry it out to the car. And so Amazon used technology in a way that created a new experience for us, and that's that experience that is creating the value. And it's like, you have to think about, if you snapped your fingers and Amazon went away, what would be the effect? And like, we're all like, oh my gosh, I'd have to go to Walmart, And so that's why I say adopting experience is a great way to think about it, a good strategy for growing your business going forward.
Well, I think that's a perfect note to end on. I love the parallel that you shared to focus on what you can control. That is a refrain that is familiar in this room because it is what they tell their clients over and over again. So put that in your pocket as you're going back to your office, that it's the same lens you should be using in your business as it relates to your experience. Control the things you can. Gentlemen, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.